Welcome back. Yes, indeed. We've got, as you've seen there, Dr. Charles Omole here with us in the studio. He is the Director General, Institute for Peace and Security Policy Research, former, and also a lawyer, security and policy expert. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're reviewing the last week or weeks because this protest that rang through. In fact, we understand there are still some scenarios about that which the authorities say they are investigating the security dimension of what happened, who did what, because we also know that there was some raid that was carried out on the Labour House. And so there's so much really going on, which the public, they may not publish or put out there until maybe they get to a certain point. For you, as a policy person, because there were several questions as to, it did appear as though government's policy, in spite of all they said they're doing and formulating as good as they are, were lost on the people. People just kept on saying, look, yes, you're saying all of this, but the result for us is not as rosy as your policies, as you painted them to be, hence the reason why they had to protest. What do you think of all of that?
Well, thank you. The first thing I would probably want to start with is protest is not a new phenomenon globally. If you look at the last 300 years, you've seen protests used to change national policies. From 1765, you're talking of the American Revolutionary protest. The French Revolution followed 20 years later. If you move to the last century, you're talking of the Indian independent movement that ended in 1947, led by Mahatma Gandhi, lots of protests. Then we moved to the civil rights periods, 50s and 60s. Of course, Martin Luther King Jr., lots of protests. Even 1989, you're talking of the Berlin Wall protests. We're talking of the Arab Spring. So protest is not a new thing. But the beauty of the length of history of protest is the fact that there are certain factors that you can see will lead to successful protests that can change national policy. From what I've seen in what's taking place recently in Nigeria, those factors, a lot of them are absent from our own protest dynamics. That means this protest as currently been put together by the youth or whoever, old Nigerians, cannot succeed until those factors are present.
What are these factors?
Okay, quite a few of them. I mean, for example, number one, leadership. One of the things the young people like saying is, oh, we are leaderless. There's never been any protest anywhere in the world that succeed in changing national policy that is leaderless. There must be leadership. There must be people you hold accountable. There are people who enunciate policies of the objective of the protest. But the idea of a leaderless protest, it's completely, there's no evidence that has ever worked in any country.
Now that's one. Before you go to the second ones, when the government says or the authorities say, look, we want to know who your leaders are. And then there are questions concerning, look, how is it that government can be asking, we want to know who your leaders are? Government has tons of information. And they should identify who are these persons, or is it a bait so that if they are suspecting certain things going on, so if people own it, then they could definitely say, look, this is why we want to do what we want to do.
Well, I mean, it's not just that. If you look at, say, the civil rights movement, for example, lots of people will say different things, but the moment Martin Luther King comes out to say things, people listen. So the whole idea of who are your leaders is who do we talk to help shape the dynamics of the protest? Who we know you will listen to? So every protest must have leaders. They must have faces that are directly held responsible. So that's the first one. The second success parameter for protest is clear and concise messaging. You have a situation where you have, I'm seeing 10 demand, 20 demand. No protest succeed on such things. You must be able to capture your demand in simple terms, civil rights. So everybody understands that. But not some 10, 20 items you're asking government to do. Protests don't work on that basis. So messaging, in fact, during that protest, if you talk to 10 different protesters, they will give you 10 different demands they want from government.
But that's natural.
Yeah, but protests don't work on the basis of such multiplicity of demand, is my say. Okay, take Kenya, for example. The first recent protest there, the focus was the finance bill, that the government should abolish it. Now, the government abolished it. 80% of the protesters left and went home. The remaining 20% cause, they actually said, you've done what we want, now we want the government out. We don't even want the government anymore. And of course, that now is a protest that is lingering on. But the actual focus element of the protest achieved its purpose. So when protests have clear, simple narrative, it's easier to succeed than when you have 10 demands, 20 demands and all that.
Are we saying that because probably we might have been used to organized labor protests across the world, wherein they can say, look, we don't want this increase, we don't want this policy from government, we don't want to be part of international. So people are thinking, okay, well, governments may be used to that kind of scenario. But these protests that we've seen in different places too, as seemingly uncoordinated as they are, there are brains behind them who are coordinated.
That is true. There are brains behind them, but the question, okay, a very good example is this our last protest. This Lagos lawyer, Adeboro, wrote to the IG on behalf of the protesters. And you see one of the so-called leaders of the protesters came a few days later and disowned him. He's not their lawyer. So you can see instantly there that there's a problem of messaging. So you wrote on your behalf to the IG, you was your lawyer then a few days ago. Now he's not speaking for you. So that's why government cannot assume who the leaders are.
Even though we don't know to what extent or the gravity of that denial. We didn't ask Mr. Ebro. Was it your clients? is it the totality of your clients, or to what degree is it your clients? So we don't know all of that.
No, that is true, but I think is the optics I'm saying, that government can't assume these are the leaders. If, for example, if 5 people come and say we are the leaders and the protests agree, those are our leaders, then that's easier. But it's not something you just assume, a position you assume. Quickly, the third thing that has led to success of protests is non-violence. You see, non-violent protest tends to succeed better than violent ones for several reasons. Number one, non-violent protest tends to increase public support for a cause. Number two, non-violent protest tends to sort of curtail the excesses of government response, so to speak. If people are sitting by the roadside protesting, for example, it's very hard for a government to say, I'll go there and start shooting them, for example. So non-violent, we saw it during the civil rights movement, where even lots of whites started supporting the civil rights because of the non-violent nature. So once...
Any Nigerian example?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure. I mean, then of course, the other factor is media coverage. Media coverage, of course, play a role in the perception of the process. You see, the thing about protests is this. If 5,000 people in the streets of Abuja today making a demand on government, question, how do we know that their demand actually represents the wishes of majority of Nigerians? Because the challenge here is that protests can be used to enforce the tyranny of the minority. The majority may actually be opposed to that demand, but they're not as vocal. So it's important, therefore, that the media coverage helps to democratize the information or the demands, so to speak, of the protest. And so that's another factor, And then, of course, you have popular support. Once a protest has popular support, it succeeds better. Now, this is the key. How a protest is conducted can affect whether it gains popular support or not. There have been history of protests in the past where the support was small to start with, but as it went on, just like the civil rights movement, support grew. Why? Because it was conducted in a way most people liked. Even those who are not fully civil rights activists felt, well, they are not doing any harm, there's nothing wrong, so why not support it? But the moment protests degenerate into, looting and all, the public support evaporates. And therefore, it keeps, once the public support evaporates, and governments have a way of testing that, it makes the government reluctant, as it were, to yield to the wishes of the minority.
Assuming that they wanted government to yield, because we don't know the demand, I mean, the intention sometimes. It could be masked under certain things, so who knows? Just thinking aloud anyways.
That is true.
Well, some of these things that you have listed, it almost sounds like as if it is a prerequisite for a protest. But some people will say, no, you know, all of these things, yes, it's necessary for a successful protest, but it is not a prerequisite for a protest at all. One of the reasons why we know that governments have been reluctant over the years and have touched the issue of subsidy with a pretty long pole is because they know that this is the kind of thing that can happen. They know that it will not go down well with the masses. So can the government of the day pretend that they didn't know that, you know, this could be the reaction, you know, as a result of the moves that they had taken, the removal of fuel subsidy, the flotation of the naira, the attendant hardships faced by everyday people, even those who hitherto were considered well-off, you know, facing such huge inflationary constraints in the economy. Can they really say that they did not think that such a day will come? It's a good thing that this protest was announced, but the ones that people really fear is the one that will never be announced.
Well, that is true, but I will assume that you don't embark on a journey, I'm assuming, that without, you know, hoping to succeed. It's like you want to make a cake and you miss your butter. Yes, you will have something that looks like a cake, but it will never be a cake. So if the elements of a successful protest are not there, yes, you will protest, but it will not achieve its purpose, is what I'm saying.
It all depends on what the purpose is, because some people will say that perhaps the message that the masses are trying to send is that status quo, the manner in which government runs itself, has run itself, you know, year in, year out, cannot continue to be the same way. Isn't that powerful enough a message?
Well, it is, but quite frankly, government doesn't need to wait for a protest to do that. Governments, you know, should have a way of, you know, feeling the pulse of the nation and proactively taking steps. Part of the challenge I feel with this government, for example, is messaging. I mean, in the last 2-3 weeks, we've heard more about what this government has done in the last year than we've had in the last 1 year. You know, so if that level of intensity of messaging had existed prior, so maybe say from the beginning of this year, who knows, you know, things might have been different. So clearly the major failure of government, I see, is strategic communication. And, you know, it's, you know, sometimes being in government can create a bubble where people feel, people, because you sign a document saying X, Y, Z, you assume people know you've done that. But that's not...
Communication is what I'm even, you know, because sometimes when we use that word, we always imagine that it is government talking to the people, telling the people what it has done. Where are the channels of feedback for the people to actually tell government how it is affecting them, how it is impacting them? Isn't that what is truly missing?
No, you are right. I mean, effective communication must have a feedback mechanism. Again, that's part of the challenge that some, you know, I mean, I think some governors, for example, have town hall meetings. You know, there has to be ways people feedback to government, but more important, not just feedback, demonstrate that those feedbacks are acted on or responded to. Now, that's part of that. All that is part of the communication mechanism of government, which currently is missing. You know, part of the mistake I think governments make a lot, which I think this government might be making the same, is when you bring people who are party officials. I mean, for example, last government, Lai Mohammed, we know, in my opinion, was effective as a party spokesperson. As a minister of the federation, I don't think it was as successful. You know, because when you are speaking, when you're in government, you are no longer speaking to your party members. You are speaking to those that voted for you. You are speaking to those that did not vote for you, and for those that didn't vote at all. So your style of communication has to change from the tribal, partisan, you know, feel. And a lot of that is what's coming out of government communication these days. And that was the problem in the past. So a more professional communication mechanism needs to be put in place. And I've not seen that done yet.
Well, I don't know. This is where we are now. The people went out. We saw a lot of, maneuverings before the protest itself, started. And perhaps one can understand government's apprehension, especially with a leadership-less protest, given our experience with NSAS. But we also know government's role, because you said something about popular support. A protest continues to have popular support if it is peaceful. One of the examples that was cited often as to how things can get out of hand is the NSAS protest. And we also know government's role in making that protest become, of getting it out of hand. We know that it was after a curfew was declared and protesters refused to go home, and, unknown gunmen were sent there in the middle of the night. And that's when things went awry. And, the whole country caught fire, more or less. This particular situation, we've seen the back and forth. No, this is where we want you to protest. No, we're not going to protest there. This is where we choose to protest. We've seen all that kind of back and forth. And we saw in other places where there were other introductions, things that had absolutely nothing, or maybe they did. Maybe they were very intentional about what they were calling for with the flags we saw flying in other places. So sometimes, do you think that government itself understands that protests, this is how they used to be conducted before, they can also evolve? For instance, nobody could tell how the Arab Spring was going to go, but the Arab Spring happened nonetheless. Are we learning lessons from how, the evolution of protests?
Well, the thing about protests is that modern day people, in the current situation, if you want to protest, you need a more effective strategy. Let me give you examples. You're talking about, the NSAS. The problem, I think, with the NSAS actually escalated the moment the Lekki toll was completely blocked by the protesters. So imagine a scenario where, for example, I can't remember how many lanes are there. I think there are 5 lanes on that toll gate. They blocked, say, 2. With their protest and allowing cars to go through the other 3. That creates a balance between their right to protest and the rights of those who don't want to protest to continue, their business. That protest could have elongated easily that way. But the moment you block it completely, that becomes oppressive for those who are not interested in the protest. So the messaging is this: protests don't have to be disruptive in terms of the lives of the people before it's effective. Take the climate change movement in Europe. When it started, most people supported it. But now some of the tactics of the climate change protesters, blocking motorways, they're not jailing them. So some have just been jailed 5 years in England, for example, for blocking the motorway, because of their protest. So whereas during the Iraq War, there was this guy in England that, built a tent, like a camping tent, opposite the parliament. He was there for over 12 months protesting peacefully. And there's no week that his face is not in one newspaper or the other. So even though he was doing a one-man peaceful protest there, he had media coverage. It was effective. Right. So effectiveness of a protest is not about it being disruptive. And I think that message needs to be passed on.
Give us your impression about the conduct of security agencies, maybe led by the police, in handling of the protests.
In my own opinion, the police this time around actually acted much better than they've done in the past. From what I know, I think the instruction really is that as if the protest is peaceful, the police response should be proportionate. But clearly, once looting and everything starts, they have to escalate a little bit. The whole idea, for example, of some governors or FCT securing court orders restricting protests in certain places is exactly the example I've just given, which is disrupting other people. There's no way you can say we want to do street to street and we can go to any street we like. No, even in England, when you want this Western world, I keep using that because that's the example a lot of our people use. When you want to protest, if it's IPAC, a cordon will have been created by the police, giving them that space, knowing that that's where they're going to protest. But you can't just say we can go to any street we like to protest. It doesn't work like that. So these are the things, people need to understand that effectiveness of a protest is not about disruptiveness. Because the moment a protest goes beyond, we are demanding X, Y, Z to we don't want this government, that changes the tone of the protest completely. Because that, in a democracy, that's not the way to change government.
Ayo.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Let me ask you something along the lines of some of the issues that you have responded to earlier. Do you think if we had an elite consensus in the various geopolitical zones of the country, elite consensus that actually supports good governance over time, not just among those people who are in the ruling class, as we say, but generally, do you think we'll still have the same kind of issues that we have, that kind of protest would have gone on the way it went?
Well, I'm not quite sure what we mean by elite consensus. It depends on what their consensus is on. I mean, others will say there is elite consensus in this country to make certain things not to work. So it depends on what. But I think what you are trying to say is that if there's an element of uniformity or agreement across the different geopolitical zones, things might be different. Well, we could see from the protest, for example, that certain zones, there was no protest at all. So clearly, what the so-called opinion leaders in communities, their views, I think, will always affect how the people in their locality respond to things. But I'm not quite sure what elite consensus you specifically have in mind.
You have actually spoken to it. So if there was that consensus in some pockets of the country and that same thing doesn't happen in other areas, I guess it begs the question whether or not there is an elite consensus of national scale where those who know what should happen actually agree that it should happen and in a particular way. For instance, almost every presidential contender or candidate in the run-up to the elections, presidential election, agreed that the fuel subsidy, for instance, has to go. What we didn't discuss with them is the mode, is the timing and everything. And even the issue of the fuel subsidy being removed has been a long time coming, more than 10 years already. So in terms, when I'm talking about the elite consensus, whether or not there is an agreement that, okay, this needs to happen, it's going to be painful for this long, and we, the elite, have to give up this and that, and then there's a national consensus, sort of, that, guys, this is the way we have to go, and these are the things that's likely to happen, which will have to bear for a while.
Okay, I understand your question clearer. Now, the thing is, I think that is a failure of strategy by the government. I mean, for example, a different messaging could have gone out before the subsidy removal took place, and the government could have said, okay, on the part of the people, this is probably what we are demanding of you, this will be the impact. On the part of the government, this is what we will do as government to show that we are all in this together. So the messaging could have been different, but that didn't happen. And of course, the optics also of government has not helped, where people are struggling in many respects, and it appears as though government is just going business as usual. So messaging on part of the key thing about that optics is this: it's not that it will really save a whole lot of money. Some of these things are emotional in nature. So, I mean, government cutting certain things here and there might not even, have a tangible financial impact on the economy. But at least in terms of messaging, it's like all the senators or all the House of Reps and all the ministers say they are cutting their pay by 50%, for example. That would say a very small amount in terms of monetary term, but in terms of messaging, that's powerful. So that, I think, is what the government could have done to create that messaging that we are all in this together, we are taking the hit, you are taking the hit, and this is a grand vision of where we're heading to as a country. That messaging did not exist, and I think that is a real problem.
Well, leading to the question of communication, well, propaganda, you cited that earlier. Propaganda is a form of communication, but its purposes have to be very clear. Maybe it is not something that a government should be using or should use where and when necessary. But in terms of general communication, government communication, public communication, I think we have a general problem, which has led to a good number of, quite a significant amount of trust deficits over the years. Now, in terms of the things that government hadn't done, which should have been done, what do you think can be done now to reverse that trend, particularly through communication? In what ways do you think government can begin to buy back the trust of the people to the point that the people will understand this needs to happen, it's going to be painful, and the people will say, okay, let's do it?
Okay. Now, in terms of communication, the number one and the chief communicator of any government in the world is the commander-in-chief. And the reason why that is the case, I mean, you have in the United Kingdom, again, good example, you have things like Prime Minister questions time every week. You know, we have sit-down interview with presidents all the time. The reason is this. If a minister comes to say X, and we've seen that happen in several, governments in Nigeria in the past, where one minister will say one thing, another minister will say slightly different thing, or the opposite. But when the president says it, it's more believable. People feel, okay, the buck stops with him. If he says this was happening, then that's what's happening. It doesn't, the same impact doesn't come from, say, a minister saying that same thing. So one of the key things that the government might want to consider is some form of, even just monthly, some form of sit-down interview with the president, where he will be able to look at Nigerians and say, these are the things I'm doing. These are the things I want done. In such a way that once he says it, it has a more powerful impact in terms of believability than other people in government saying it. And we see people in government contradicting themselves all the time. So that's number one. The commander-in-chief has to communicate better. Then secondly, I think the government need to create what I call talking points, more effective talking points. So if you are a minister or spokesperson for any particular ministry, there has to be, it could be weekly, it could be monthly talking points, so that there is a bit of consistency in messaging. I mean, for example, a very clear example I can give right now, look at the protests going on in the United Kingdom, for example. If you see the response of practically every Labour party politician or member in government, they largely be saying the same thing. So there have been discipline of messaging in that sense. If, for example, in that messaging, they've completely not addressed the issue of immigration as being a factor in the protest. But we know that's a factor, but they don't want to address it yet. So everybody speaking on behalf of government, speaking along the same narrow path. So there has to be that consistency of that great discipline of messaging. And, like we say in terms of the pedagogy of teaching, once you repeat the same thing over and over again, it sinks in better than you hearing different things. So there has to be consistency across government in terms of communication. It has to be done more frequently. And of course, talking about building trust, part of the communication has to be, we said we would do this, here it is, we have done it. Right. We said we would do this, here it is, we have done
That's a conditional cause.
We
said we did it, we've done. But if not done, we said we'll do, but we've not done, we're coming.
Exactly.
So if you don't do so, it will be incomplete at that point. But thank you for coming on. Dr. Charles Omole is a lawyer, security, and policy expert. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, we see your message, Dr. Enahena. He says, no government, whether civilian or military, is capable to win lordship over a people who are more tenacious yet lovely, intransigent yet intelligent, obstinate yet undaunted in the face of adversity, obdurate yet goal-getters. This government is toiling with people already on the brink. They are hungry, angry, and impoverished with 34.2% inflation rates, he says. All right. Well, thank you all for your messages. We can't take any more. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain, so have yourselves a very good day. Thank you for watching. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Have a productive week. I'm Ayo Makinde.